We all get caught in routines. The days blend together, one just like the next, and we forget who we really are. But sometimes life throws something unexpected at us, something that shakes us awake and reminds us what it means to feel alive again. This is my story, and maybe, just maybe, you'll see a little of yourself in it. My name is Emily, and I'm 54 years old. For the longest time, I thought I knew what love really meant. Marriage felt like a comfortable routine, predictable evenings at home, a life measured in steady rhythms. I wasn't chasing excitement or seeking unexpected moments. At least that's the story I told myself. But then something happened that completely shifted my perspective, and I realized just how much I'd been sleepwalking through my own life. I want to share this with you because maybe you'll recognize yourself in my story. Maybe you'll avoid the mistake I almost made. Not the mistake of doing something wrong, but the mistake of forgetting who you are. It all began on a Friday night in late summer. The air was warm and heavy, the kind of evening where time seems to drag on. My husband Mark had left that morning for a fishing weekend with his brother, leaving me alone with us. I looked forward to the solitude. A long bath, comfy pajamas, a glass of wine, and an old movie I'd seen 100 times before. Everything felt safe and familiar. Then I heard knocking at the door. 3 quick taps, deliberate but not too loud. It startled me. It was almost 9:00, far too late for a visitor. I set my wine down and walked barefoot across the floor, unsure who could be showing up at this hour. When I opened the door, I found myself face to face with Aaron, Mark's nephew. I hadn't seen him in nearly a year, not since we'd attended his mother's funeral together. He looked older now, more defined somehow, but there were still traces of that uncertain boy I remembered. The rain had started to fall, and his dark hair was plastered against his forehead, dripping water. "Hey, Aunt Emily," he said, his voice deeper than I remembered. "Oh, sorry to just show up like this. My phone died, and Uncle Mark said I could crash in your guest room if I needed to. I didn't realize he'd be gone." I blinked, trying to make sense of his sudden appearance. He was holding a small travel bag, standing with slightly hunched shoulders, as if unsure whether he belonged on my doorstep. "Aaron, of course," I said, stepping aside to let him in. "Mark's away for the weekend, but you're more than welcome here." He gave me a quiet, grateful smile as he crossed the threshold. The moment he stepped inside, I suddenly became acutely aware of my thin pajama top, the lack of a bra underneath, my damp hair, and my bare feet. I crossed my arms awkwardly, trying to seem casual. "Looks like the rain really picked up out there," I commented, trying to break the uncomfortable silence. "Yeah, it caught me off guard walking from the bus station," he said, glancing down at his wet clothes. I showed him to the guest room and grabbed fresh towels from the closet. He thanked me quietly, then started drying his hair while I lingered in the hallway, unsure of what to do next. "I'll leave you to get settled," I told him. "There's leftover pasta in the fridge if you're hungry." Thanks, Aunt Emily. I'm mostly just exhausted," he replied. He didn't immediately shut the door, though. He stood there holding the towel, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Gratitude, yes, but something else, too. His gaze lingered a bit longer than felt comfortable, or maybe I just imagined it. I retreated to the kitchen, trying to shake off the strange flutter in my chest. It had been years since any man had looked at me that way. Later that night, sleep wouldn't come. I kept replaying the moment at the door, how he looked at me, how I felt standing there in my thin pajamas, suddenly seen in a way I hadn't been in a long time. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain against the windows. Around midnight, I decided to pour myself another glass of wine, and that's when I found him again. Aaron was sitting on the couch, the living room bathed in near darkness, the only light coming from the hallway. He looked up when I entered. "Sorry," he said softly. "I didn't mean to startle you. I couldn't sleep either." I laughed quietly. "You and me both." A long pause settled between us. Neither of us acknowledged what was hanging there, but we both felt it. I could have gone to my bedroom. Maybe I should have. Instead, I sat on the opposite end of the couch. We talked for a while, about everything and nothing. His college courses, my garden, how quickly time passed. The conversation felt easy, almost natural, and eventually something shifted in the air. I noticed how he watched my lips when I spoke, how his voice dropped when he asked personal questions. I wasn't naive, but knew exactly what was happening. I knew the line that shouldn't be crossed, but for some reason I didn't move away. Maybe it was the wine. Maybe it was the loneliness I'd been ignoring for too long. Or maybe it was something else, a part of me that had been dormant for years. But I didn't cross that line. Not that. The moment just lingered between us, unanswered, and I knew deep down that it wouldn't stay unanswered for long. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. The sky was that soft gray that makes everything feel suspended in time. I wrapped myself in my old bathrobe and headed for the kitchen, trying to shake off the strange weight in my chest. I didn't expect to find Aaron there already. Barefoot, his shirt wrinkled, hair still damp from a shower. He was standing at the stove, stirring something in a pan. The smell of eggs and toast filled the room. "I hope you don't mind," he said, glancing back at me. "I thought I'd make breakfast. You always used to cook for me when I stayed over as a kid. I figured I owed you one." I tried to smile. "You didn't have to do that, but thank you." He pointed to the coffee maker. "Coffee should be ready any minute." I sat at the kitchen table watching him in the soft morning light. He seemed more confident than I remembered, yet that same gentle quality was still there. The careful way he moved, the thoughtful way he spoke. When he placed a plate in front of me, our hands brushed. It was brief, but I felt it, that unspoken awareness between us. We ate mostly in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt intimate, familiar, yet entirely new. After breakfast, he helped me wash the dishes. Standing beside him, me rinsing him drying, felt like something I wasn't supposed to experience. The small domestic routines of a couple, and it shook me because it felt too right. I offered him detergent for his damp clothes, and he thanked me quietly before heading back to the guest room. I should have kept myself busy. I should have left the house, but instead I wandered into the sunroom and curled up in a chair, my thoughts a mess, my guilt even messier. By early afternoon I heard footsteps behind me. Aaron said gently, "Can I ask you something?" I looked up. He stood in the doorway, arms loosely folded, eyes searching mine. "Of course," I said. "Do you ever feel like you're just going through the motions?" he asked. "You wake up, do what you're supposed to do, smile when people expect you to, but it's like you're watching your life from outside yourself?" I blinked, taken aback by the question, by how perfectly it echoed thoughts I'd never spoken aloud. "All the time," I admitted softly. He nodded, stepping closer. "I feel that way too, like I'm caught between who I was and who I'm supposed to be now." I didn't know how to respond. There was something raw about him in that moment, and something inside me wanted to match his honesty with my own truth. "He used to feel very alive," I said slowly. Before the routine took over, before expectations, I used to feel like my life was mine." Aaron sat on the ottoman in front of me, his knees almost touching mine. "I think you still have that in you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I can see it." My breath caught in my throat. I didn't know how to respond to being seen like that. He didn't move. Neither did I. It wasn't about romance. Not exactly. It was something deeper, something emotional, like someone had cracked open a window in a room I'd forgotten existed. I don't remember how long we sat there, but at some point his fingers brushed mine, a small, tentative gesture. He didn't push. He just stayed there, waiting for me to decide. I pulled my hand away. Not because I was angry, but because I was scared. Scared of what I was feeling, of what it meant. Scared of what might happen if I didn't stop it. "I need some air," I said quickly, standing up. "I'm going to the garden." He nodded without saying a word, watching me go. I stepped outside into the warm breeze. The sunlight flickered through the trees, and the smell of lavender filled the air. I stood there barefoot, watching the wind chimes sway on the porch. My life had always been neat, routine, predictable. But this felt different, messy, uncertain, and it scared me, because a part of me wanted to open that door. A part of me wanted to feel again, but I wasn't ready. Not yet. Not with him. Not with anyone. At least, that's what I told myself. The next 2 days passed in an odd rhythm. as if we were both holding our breath, waiting for something to change, but too afraid to make the first move. Aaron stayed mostly quiet, helping me with small chores around the house, fixing things Mark had promised to fix months ago, and I tried to keep my distance. But every now and then, I'd catch him looking at me. Not in a crude way, but thoughtful, curious. By Sunday afternoon, the house felt heavy with unspoken words. Mark would be home soon, and we both felt the ticking clock. I was folding laundry in the living room when Aaron entered, holding a photo album I hadn't seen in years. "I found this in the guest room," he said, holding it up. "I hope that's okay." I smiled. "Of course, that thing's older than both of us, I think." He sat beside me, flipping through the yellowed pages. The pictures faded with time. One was of Mark and me from our first Christmas together. I was holding a crooked little tree. "You looked so happy," Aaron said, studying the photo. "I was," I said quietly. He looked up. "And now?" The question hit me like a stone dropped into still water. "I don't know," I replied truthfully. "I think I stopped asking myself that a while ago." Aaron nodded, closing the album gently. "You deserve to be happy," he said softly. I looked at him, really looked at him. No pretense, no hidden agenda, just raw honesty. "You're very kind," I said, "but kindness like that can be dangerous sometimes." He asked, tilting his head. "Because it makes people feel things they're not sure they should feel." His eyes held mine. "The feelings aren't wrong, Emily. What we do with them, that's what matters." My heart beat louder in my chest. "I think you should gather your things," I said, standing up. "Mark will be home soon." He didn't argue, just nodded and stood. As he turned to walk down the hallway, he paused and looked back. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "this weekend meant something to me. It wasn't just the quiet moments, or the way you listened, it mattered." Then he was gone. I sat back down, trembling slightly. I hadn't done anything wrong. But emotionally, I knew the boundaries had blurred. When Mark returned, Aaron had already left. He left a note on the kitchen table, written in neat handwriting. "I thank you for the warmth, the honesty, and the silence." I won't forget it. I folded it carefully and placed it in the drawer with old keys and receipts. Mark told me all about his trip while I nodded, smiling politely. My hands folded in my lap. My thoughts were elsewhere, not on Aaron, not exactly, but on what he had awakened in me. A question, a longing, something I couldn't name. The days after Aaron left felt strange, ordinary but electric, like something had shifted, even if I didn't understand exactly what it was. I was in the garden a week later, pulling weeds from the roses when my phone buzzed. A message from Aaron. "Hope I'm not crossing a line," it said. "Just wanted to say thank you for that weekend. I hope you're okay." I stared at the screen. My first instinct was to ignore it, to pretend none of it had happened, to tuck it all away like a passing storm. But I didn't. I replied, "Amy? I'm okay. I've been thinking a lot. Thank you for reminding me I still can." I didn't wait for a reply. Just sending it felt like the most honest thing I'd done in a long time. Later that night, I sat with an old journal I hadn't opened in years, flipping through pages of who I used to be, before marriage, before routines, before I defined myself only through others. I didn't write about Aaron. I wrote about me. The next morning, Mark noticed a change in me. "You look rested," he said. I smiled. "I feel lighter." He raised an eyebrow but didn't probe. "Some things weren't meant to be shared. They were private. Weeks passed. Aaron didn't message again, and I didn't expect him to. Whatever that weekend had been, it was a mirror, not a door. He wasn't the answer. He was the question, a question that changed me. One afternoon, I stood in front of the mirror and looked at myself. Not to judge, not to correct, but to see. And I did. I saw the woman I had become, still capable of feeling deeply. Me, still capable of choosing. I turned to Mark. "I've been thinking," I said. "We should take that trip to the coast. The one we always talked about but never planned." He looked surprised. "Really? Now?" I nodded. "Why not now?" He smiled a little. "We're serious." I nodded. In that moment I realized something. It wasn't about Aaron. It never really was. It was about remembering that I still had the capacity to be surprised, even by myself.